for joining. This is so nice to have everyone on one roundtable. The start of this was all because of Michael. Like, Michael started CreatorDAO, and I thought it was really interesting. And I kind of like braided the team about being like a software-enabled and AI-enabled creator, and then got into like their first creator cohort. Michael, do you want to touch on what CreatorDAO is and the context there?
Yeah, of course. So CreatorDAO is basically a community of creators that invest and support each other. And for context, I went through Y Combinator and I saw something really powerful happen with the founder community. And I wanted to replicate that. And I think with Web3 ownership principles, it could actually be even more powerful in the long run. And so that's what we built. And, with, part of that initial group of helping us build this and tested it with us. We had some growing pains. We're still working on our stuff, but he trusted me a little bit. So I appreciate him taking the chance on us. And yeah, he was part of that first cohort. And you start seeing this, like creators interview each other and help each other, right? This is CreatorDAO in action, right? I'm doing this because I want to support Tino. Tino's interviewing because he wants to support the mission of the DAO. And so to me, one of the most beautiful things about Web3 was community. And people got obsessed with token prices, obsession around like, how can we hype up things instead of truly, building a decentralized community. That was what the original Bitcoin Ethereum group did, right? They all went out there. Like, I still think one of the magical moments in Bitcoin was one guy was like, I'll pay you, maybe it was like 10,000 Bitcoin, which is probably worth 20-something million today, just to buy one person pizza. But it was two people who didn't know each other, building community in a completely decentralized way by accepting currency. And Ethereum was a group of developers coming today. And I think the next generation of that is DAOs, a group of creators coming together to help each other. So
yeah,
that's it.
We could level set here. Thanks, Michael. With just a round of intros. Megan, you want to jump off? This is our first time meeting, but I know Bing for like 3-4 years. Met through like media tech stuff. It's like just a perfect intersection of the two. And Rembrandt and Michael can cap it off. If you want to go again, I guess that's more about CreatorDAO and less about yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, I went a little bit long.
That's okay. Yeah.
Do you want me to introduce myself or GoldHouse or both?
Both, please.
Okay, absolutely. So GoldHouse, I don't know how familiar you guys are with our brand, but we were founded in 2018 to basically reshape perception and success and empowerment for the Asian and Pacific Islander community. And so the goal being, let's change how society sees us as a population. And in doing so, let's also change the game for us socially and economically. So a lot of our early work had to do with the media and entertainment world, which is Michael's world and Rembrandt's world. And a lot of the work we did is advising Hollywood on how they can better represent and more accurately and affirmatively portray Asians and Pacific Islanders. Slowly, then we began to evolve and realize that the same kind of change making that we were doing on the big screen could also be done in C-suites and boardrooms, and change other unfortunate stats like the fact that we're the least well represented in upper management. So that was kind of like my remit when I joined GoldHouse. I had an investment background, and so I'd already seen the lack of diversity, especially for APIs, in investment management and venture, and the trickle-down effect, how founders receive capital and support. So I came into GoldHouse to build programs, all kinds of programs to support that community. We started with an accelerator, grew into the largest founder network for APIs in the country, and now a fund to invest in early stage companies with Asian founders. And I think along the way, what it's shown me is that change can happen really fast. I grew up in Minnesota, and so for me, seeing this type of representation and diversity in really influential decision-making roles is something I never imagined would be possible. And in the last 3-4 years, I've seen it change dramatically. And so I think the work that GoldHouse is doing and the work that I get to do through this organization is really important to me. And it allows us to meet awesome founders like Michael and invest in cool companies like CreatorDAO through our fund. So it's extra exciting.
Thanks, Megan. Rembrandt?
I'll add to, sorry, I just had to add, but yeah, I'm super grateful GoldHouse invested. I was one of the VC partners back in the day for GoldHouse too. So I was connected in a few different ways. This is the first time meeting Megan in over Zoom, but thank you for backing us.
Yeah, well, we're super grateful too. I think the best is when it's a mutual partnership and there's benefits on both sides. So thanks for letting us be part of your journey.
Rembrandt, you want to jump in?
Yeah. You want me to just do a quick intro?
Yeah, please. Yourself and
so-
what you're working on now.
What was that?
Yourself and then what you're working on now.
Oh, yeah. So I'm Rembrandt Flores, and what the majority of my work right now is focused on 8 Commas. And 8 Commas is a marketing consultancy specifically for Web3 companies. So we're thinking NFT projects, cryptocurrencies, protocols, blockchain native businesses. The kind of work that we're doing right now is mostly in comms, entertainment marketing, and IRL events. Our clients include the likes of dYdX, Metacrafters, McLaren Automotive, Xenu, Forgotten Runes, Coach, Basic Space, to name a few. We just came back from a slew of events at Art Basel, where we worked with World of Women on their gala, as well as Dapper Labs, and they launched their first NFT project and did an exhibition with their artist Jimmy Paints to promote Seeds of Happiness NFT. And then we also helped out with Teleport, which is basically the Uber chain. And so they had a big launch party this past Saturday. And I think the narrative here is that we definitely want to help onboard more, I guess, mainstream into Web3. We all know that it's not going to survive with just the endemic people that are currently there, which represents, I think, 1% of the population. If we're just basing it on wallets, we know that there's only 1.6 million wallets that are currently out there buying and trading NFTs or investing in crypto. And we want to change that. So I think our job as a consultancy is to tell more people who are not yet familiar and try to slowly but surely explain to them that not the entire community is not an FTX or a 3 Arrows or any of these others that they may not trust, but the majority of the people are really building, such as Michael, who I've known for quite a long time now, and everyone else that's building who is really trying to change. I think the use cases here are to make our entire world a better place to live and help. I'm working on a project right now. Well, I'm going to be starting in January, where they're using blockchain to help the environment. And I think that this type of use case is where we're going to go in the future, not just trading and pumping and dumping NFTs.
Very cool. And Michael, you want to step in? I guess you already know Megan, and you already know Rembrandt.
And
I guess
I gotta
for listeners, perhaps.
Rembrandt a shout out. Like when I was first starting this, and I don't come from the entertainment world. I had some connections through my other part, Joe Montana, but Rembrandt was one of the first people to give me advice. I just continue to be shocked how connected he is. I knew he was super friendly and generous because I didn't know him at all at the time. It just came through an intro through a friend, and I remember it immediately started giving. So I got to give him a special shout out because that's
who Rembrandt is. That's who Rembrandt is.
I'm here to help Michael, and I'm here to help GoldHouse and Megan. I'm here to help Eugene for everyone. And I think that
super grateful.
Right,
this is before we had any PR and anything.
Exactly. At the end of the day, the only people who are going to help us are each other, right? No one's looking out for us. And you guys know that, and Megan sort of touched on that. So it's really, really important that we support each other. And this is all coming from a real and honest and I guess, how do I say it? That's it. It's genuine. And I'm not doing it because I want something from you guys. I really don't. I'm happy to help you without any kind of return, except that makes me feel good. So that's why I help others, is to feel good.
It's good thing we feel the same way, because now it can just circle of love.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when this goes out and it just flies out into the universe, I think the right people gravitate towards it. So I heard about GoldHouse because I met Bing pre-COVID. Got breakfast at it was the Earth Cafe.
You got to get Bing's workout routine. I don't know what he does, but
guys, he does
it. Ben Chu, our head of finance, was Bing's trainer back in the day.
No way.
Yeah, I don't know if you should look up Ben's Instagram. He's Jack. He has 4 sons. He's this dude that's just like powerlifter. He's probably a 758.
Because big is jacked, so more jacked than
Oh,
big.
yes. Yes, that was how it started.
Yeah, I also noticed that Bing's in great shape. But no, he was telling me about GoldHouse, and when COVID hit, it was they started an online community, and I joined On Deck in COVID. I joined GoldHouse in COVID because I would say I'm pretty extroverted. I need people in my life, and COVID was hard for me. And so I wanted to zoom out a little bit because you guys have all done great jobs now building your personal communities through your reputation over time, through your conversations and your work. And something I really believe in is that large changes happen in perception shifts as opposed to like technology or finance. It's like the way we start to look at things. This is more of a question for you, Megan, and feel free to jump in, Rembrandt or Michael. Can you draw a line in the sand, perhaps, of what the current perception was in your respective areas and like how you're trying to change it, either through your work or through story or other mediums?
Yeah, absolutely. I think on the entertainment, so I'll answer that question in two ways. I think on the entertainment and media side, there's this historical backdrop of APIs, Asian and Pacific Islander faces, fitting into certain stereotypes, and those stereotypes are basically limited to emasculated male characters, females that are hypersexualized, used as these sort of timid, subservient creatures, and there's really nothing in between that and reality.
Yeah.
So I think from an entertainment and media side, there was a very clear directive of we need to change the way our faces are shown. And we need to make that more affirming and more positive and portraying us the way we actually are in the world. And so it's actually a very simple, straightforward answer, right? It's just make sure that you have voices in the room when Hollywood is creating these representations, and make sure that all the way from the casting to the directing to the producing and distributing of this content, that you're being authentic to how we want to be portrayed. We've done a lot of that work. I think it's a little more complicated on the business end of the spectrum because there's a lot more nuance and dynamic and a lot more voices in the room and kind of in the background making decisions about who gets promoted from junior ranks through middle management up to senior management, who as a founder gets money and raises A, B, C, D, E rounds and then ultimately gets to have a successful exit. So I think on the business side, we have taken a much more grassroots approach to changing our North Star of C-suite and boardroom representation, rather than saying we have all these Fortune 500 companies that have poor representation at the top and banging on their doors and saying, change your ways. Our approach has been to go down to the beginning and find really, really talented entrepreneurs who are creating amazing things and help them shorten their timeline to getting to being big Fortune 500 companies, and know that on the back end, then you won't have this retroactive problem of fixing what their representation looks like. So those are like the problems that we see. I think the work we continue to do every day, and it's very difficult, but we're lucky to have partners like Michael and Rembrandt watching out for us.
And so what's the two line, what's like the megaphone, the story that you'd like to spread that contrasts everything that you're seeing in those problem spaces?
I think what I would like the narrative to become is that the way we show up is not related to our perception. It's related to what we bring to the table that's unique as a culture, as a people. And it's a really interesting question with API because that umbrella captures so many different languages and cultures and countries. And so I think what it is looking a little bit deeper and saying, okay, every single one of these people is unique. So don't even try to pin any kind of preconceived perception on them and just value them for what they bring to the table.
Got it. Would you guys have anything to add to that, Michael or Rembrandt? In terms of, to reframe it, what's the perception change that you'd like to drive that benefits you or doesn't benefit you, perhaps, in your guys' spaces?
I mean, relative to where I guess where I'm looking at is that I look at the people who are in Web3 right now, and I honestly see a lot of Asian faces. So I don't look at it as a place where I'm like, oh, I need to introduce this space to more Asians, because thankfully, I'm not going to sit here and try to explain why that is. Maybe because a lot of people in tech decided to go into Web3, or it's just people who happen to be of Asian descent are in Web3. But I think that, to me, it's more of not saying it's a racial thing, but more of like, hey, there are people still who are not in Web3 from different, how do I say, verticals of business, right? So, for example, entertainment, since we're on that topic, there's a lot of people in entertainment that I think should be in Web3. A lot of people in finance happen to be in Web3, at least the ones that I know. Art, same thing. A lot of the artists I know are just gravitating towards Web3 because they perhaps did not achieve economic success in this other area, but now in Web3 they're getting that freedom, and they're getting, I guess, closer access to people who might buy their artwork by doing an NFT rather. So I think we're lucky. I think it's fortunate that all the conferences that I've been to throughout this year, which is a lot. I didn't know there were going to be so many Web3 conferences around the world, but thankfully and fortunately, there is representation for us. I do see a discrepancy, though, in other, I would say, other groups per se. Maybe the Latin community or the African American community could use more exposure, and I think those are the people that I would try to expose Web3 to, because they would definitely see benefits from this. And you know, me being specifically Filipino American, I think that Web3 has proved to be a great resource for those in a third world country like the Philippines, with Axie Infinity, with YGG, which is very prevalent, obviously, in that country. There's been a lot of, I guess, growth in Web3 there. I know that they just had their Web3 festival there. They just had Philippine Blockchain Week, and these individuals who not necessarily had a lot of economic mobility are now seeing that in Web3, which is phenomenal, and which is liberating, which is exciting and amazing, that these people are now making money that they could only have dreamed of, and now it's a reality for them in 2022.
Yeah, it's compelling. The stuff can kind of change people's lives. I think, like, the headline cases. What were those artists? Rembrandt, you might be able to name a few of these. Some of the artists who's an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid who he's the Web3 artist who there's some.
Are you talking about Ferocious or someone else?
Ferocious. Yeah, can you give people his background? I know the headline, but I wanted to touch on how this can change people's lives.
It's amazing because, as you said, he's a teenager. He's a transgender teenager, mm-hmm. and he was completely, I think, I don't want to misspeak, but he was on the streets, and then this changed his life, and now he's able to make a living off his art because of Web3, because of NFTs. And when that whole, I don't want to call it debacle, but when there was this whole thing about OpenSea not giving, I guess, what do you call it?
Was it
back
royalties
to the artists? What was that?
Was it royalties? Was that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The artist royalties. There was a big discrepancy there. He was the first one to say, hey, if it wasn't for these royalties, I would not be here, right? And that's really compelling to hear from himself, from Ferocious, and it's true that there's a lot of artists who are not known, who depend on these royalties to make a living. So they're not living on the streets or living in their car or couch surfing. So that's a great point to bring up, Shino. But yes.
Yeah, these new verticals, new formats and technologies change people's lives. I just think of how back in MySpace days, Soulja Boy probably would have never made it in the music industry. But because of this medium called MySpace and the internet, he was the first one up the wall and paved the path for many artists. And this is probably true in different mediums, like visual art, like Ferocious, music, and corporate governance, like Michael. So, like, Michael, you talk about the DAO you're trying to create. I know that these DAOs don't start out as decentralized, but can you just let people know why this concept of corporate governance is so important, especially in the context of creators, and perhaps putting Asians in the light where they might not have been in classic Hollywood or entertainment venues?
Yeah, one of the things I've seen is centralized entities tend to perpetuate whatever was happening before. You've seen this with wealth. Like if you have a centralized bank that already has wealthy people, it perpetuates, versus right now, like one of the initiatives we're doing is something called The Search, which is this decentralized voting for STEM asset creators. Again, it's not a criticism of other DAOs, but I would say most DAOs, a couple big wallet holders control everything. And they basically know how they're going to vote, and everybody just follows them. I can tell you right now, as founder of CreatorDAO, the largest equity holder, largest tokens of it, I have no idea who's going to win. Why? Because it truly is a decentralized picking. That I'm okay if we find somebody who looks completely different than me. So it's not just the Asian American story. It's the story of like decentralization, allowing the picking of success in people to somebody that doesn't look like what they do today, right? Like that's great. To me, that's the Asian American story. It's the African American story. It's Indians, everybody else that had that opportunity. And I looked at things that in the past gave people this opportunity. And to me, either there were people who took chances. I think Paul Grant's Y Combinator, he took chances with people who didn't look normal. They were college dropouts, didn't look but another big one was decentralized entities that were able to say, because it wasn't controlled, like you can imagine, like this happens, right? Like when you start a small business, maybe when you go to the bank, if the bank lender is a white male, they're probably more likely to lend to other white males. So what happens? Who gets the opportunity to success? It's other white males, and that keeps perpetuating. However, if you go and it's a vote and it's truly, it'll reflect the population, right? So to me, it's somewhat the Asian American story, but somewhat the story of like people who weren't given opportunities. What happens when you let a decentralized entity pick? So I remember a story. I was in an Uber and I was talking to this person, amazing singer, and they're like, "Hey, audition for The Voice," and the producer wouldn't even look up at him because he didn't have the look that would be great on national TV, but he could be amazingly talented. That's what I want to discover. That's the kind of creators that the world should be discovering. And that's how CreatorDAO works, right? Like we should give the resources, the mentorship and everything else to a diverse group of people who represents the broader population. And, it could be Asian, it could not be. I don't know who it would be. I can truly tell you right now, I don't. I will say, during the process of being creators, I heard so many of the stories where like I met people like Jim Attack, like Gary, who aren't, they were like, we didn't have these examples. Like Jimmy O, they didn't have examples of that growing up, so they didn't even know they could make it in the entertainment industry, right? But they're pushing the boards. I think they're doing it way better than me. But as they do it and other people see them, there'll be more opportunities. But how can we accelerate that process in a lot of ways? By just making it, truly like the best talent, whoever gets the votes can win.
Yeah, I want to unpack that. I'm glad you point out the core concept as opposed to the example. The core concept is, just to reiterate, when systems are built, they tend to repeat themselves because the people in those systems. This is human nature, right? Like I joke, my group of friends, group of 5 guys. One guy's from Lebanon, one guy's normal white guy, guy's Indian, I'm Filipino. I'm like, we look like a Jeep commercial today. Like we just a spattering of people. But like, I tend to think that people who do that, just the perpetuating of the same kind of people, I call them seagulls. Like seagulls, they kind of just hang out with seagulls. And I think we're biological creatures, but we transcend biology through social. And it sounds like DAOs transcend this perpetuation of the same thing with incentives. Can you like level set for people? Like, because we know a lot about this stuff. Rembrandt's way steep in it. Megan, you see a lot of cutting edge stuff. Yeah. I know what it is, but can you, in creator terms, niche it out and talk about like, typical corporation structures very broadly, And then what makes DAOs different, and what is a DAO for people who don't know?
I think of corporations as having a manager, in which case most corporations, the CEO, maybe you could call it a board, and things are organized very hierarchically. I would look at DAOs as communities first. There can be hierarchies, it can be sub-DAOs, it could be a lot of stuff, with almost the benefits of software. Like corporations are these social structures. How can you build software inherently where you get the benefits of what make blockchain so powerful, which is this trustless nature, where everybody's like, hey, it's transparent. This is exactly how it operates. Anybody can read the code. And with the advantage of massive scale, where instead of saying, hey, there's one leader, this is the CEO of the company, there's a community of people who are all helping and supporting each other and directing it. Like this kind of social structure directs it in a way that benefits the entire community. And to me, it's a structure that honestly the world's never quite seen before. And organize that, there's a lot, like if anybody's been a part of a really big group project, it can be really disorganized. If you ever joined a large Discord, it can be messy. But with the right software and the right things it can actually be more powerful than centralized entities. And some people would say we're seeing that play out in crypto today in a very similar case, like FTX versus Uniswap. FTX is a centralized entity, and Uniswap is a decentralized entity. They're both doing the same things. They're enabling trading. And I'm not saying like centralized. And look, there's immense power to centralized entities. What FTX has been able to do on the marketing side, they were able to spend all this money, do all these things, how to manage all this. Everybody's seen the negatives, right? When one person's in charge, or let's say a small group and they're bad actors, they can destroy a company. Unlike a decentralized, like you could be a bad actor in Uniswap, and unless you're like part of the core team, and maybe a whole 20 of you all change the core code, effectively Uniswap takes everybody. Everybody's acting in a selfish way, yet they're all liquidity providers, right? As they provide liquidity in completely like, hey, I want to benefit myself, they're actually making the liquidity pool bigger, which will enable trading, which makes benefits the entire community. So to me, like we've seen the power of decentralized entities. They enable these incentives that are really cool. It's programmable. Everybody can look at Uniswap's code and realize, hey, they're not scamming me because especially if you're an engineer, you can even contribute to code. You can be part of writing that. And you can have no experience. You never got hired by Uniswap, but maybe you contribute to some open source that they end up using, or maybe a liquidity provider you contribute. And that's not to say that like there's not incredible power in centralized entities, but there's also incredibly powerful in decentralized ones. And you could draw the same analogy, and sorry for going a little bit over, I know I'm dominating time, but I just think it's an interesting thesis. The US dollar versus Bitcoin. And this is where I'm different than crypto maximist, which is like Bitcoin's the best. There's a huge advantage to US dollars. They have an army. Bitcoin does not have an army, right? Like the US Army makes you pay taxes. Like if you don't pay taxes, you go to jail. If you don't pay your gas fees, it's part of, like, I got the theorem is better for gas fees. It's part of the system, right? It's in-baked, it's programmable. And only recently has software enabled this kind of thing that's so powerful. But there's also something powerful about the fact that, like, I think Ethereum, I'm going to use Ethereum as an example because you see the program, but Bitcoin effectively is the same without the smart contracts. All these engineers are there to make it better. Everybody's contributing. When we talk about NFTs were built on Ethereum. It would not have been able. You cannot build NFTs on the US dollar, right? Because nobody's, like, not a decentralized group of people are trying to improve it every day. It's the Fed saying these are the terms, and everybody listens to them as they set the interest rates. And it's like the biggest deal in the financial world and the entire economy. And if you remember, like even Bitcoin's first signature, and I forget, it was like the Bank of England, whatever it is, it was basically this criticism of a centralized entity saying, today we're going to decide something that affects hundreds of millions, if not a billion people, because interest rates affect, like, have a much outlier effect even beyond the country that of origin. And a lot of times they aren't the right decision. They make things worse. But again, like FTX, centralized, all these things are good examples where centralized entities have incredible power to do marketing, build stuff, but they also have the potential to make things worse. And when it's centralized in a couple of people, that's not good, right? It's not good that, like, your retirement money, your stocks, is basically up to the Fed. If the Fed tomorrow decided low interest rates, I guarantee your stock will go up. A couple people sitting in a room decide effectively your financial future.
That's scary. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm, like, I was the economics major. A lot of them went to the same argument. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but it's Demarcus's idea of, hey, it's under the control of us. Like the same as the artist, right? Like they should control the royalties, right? Ultimately, like I even think if the royalty example, it should have been in the program itself, right? It should have been baked in the smart contract that they knew it's like, hey, it's programmable. And again, actually, royalties is an example of actually semi failures in the smart contracts that people didn't know. And that's why OpenSea is trying to upgrade and basically like, hey, we block ones, but like all this other stuff's happening. But it's interesting that it was the exchanges themselves because they had so much power, like, hey, we can dictate that or not. Versus actually what should have been, it should have been part of the program to start off. So that was a long-winded answer. I actually forget your original question, but it was a long-winded answer about like, hey, what's the power of decentralization versus centralization?
I want to switch gears here a little bit. Thank you for that, Michael. And talk about the ladders that you guys have climbed individually. And because at some point, every time you get to a new level, there's a new level for you to climb. We're all trying to climb to the next level, whatever that is for us personally. But I wanted to, Rembrandt, you've been in a lot of these rooms. I wanted to kind of touch on how you got into these rooms, how you stay in these rooms. But Megan, I want to hear from you first because like you're from Minnesota. I'm from Spokane, Washington. I didn't know what a VC was until I was like, I must have been 23. And it was never made important to me that going to a brand name school was even important because all we cared about was like football and basketball and like, you know, hang out with friends on Friday. It like, as opposed to my I call my second family, my best friend grew up in Princeton and they're conditioned since they're like 4 years old to like go to the school, get the grades, get into Princeton, and like
it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. And so like even still, even if you did go achieve these levels like you have, Michael, I think you're at Harvard and grad, etc. What's the next room for you and how do you guys get into those rooms? But I wanted to, you don't have to go that far back, but would love to hear those ladders for you, Megan, coming from Minnesota.
Oh my gosh, you just said that in more of a Minnesotan accent than I ever did.
Thank you.
I'm happy to go back. I mean, I think it's important. I think I did have some of the benefits growing up with immigrant parents who came from China and came here as grad students. And so they did emphasize the traditional sort of trappings, like education was number one priority. Going to a good school was an absolute must. And I kind of grew up with that in the back of my mind, or actually in the forefront of my mind, that those were my priorities and those were set. I think the ladders that I climbed through adolescence were set for me by my parents and by the expectations that they had. I think as I got into college and then moving into like first job and then ultimately with GoldHouse, the ladders became different because the rooms that I wanted to get into either wouldn't allow me in or they didn't exist. And so I think what has changed for me has been this concept of you can climb as many ladders as you want. You can go to great schools, you can get degrees upon degrees, you can get shiny badges on your resume by working at big banks or consulting firms or all these different like widely accepted like recognition. But at the end of the day, if there is a ceiling, you will hit it. And the faster you get the ladder, the faster you hit it.
Yeah.
And so
that's funny. That's really good.
It's kind of this double-edged sword of like, do you want to play the game that society's handed to you, or do you want to create one for yourself? And I think Michael and Rembrandt really understand this to their core because this is what they do day in and day out. I think it's a more recent realization for me what is possible through GoldHouse. And for me, GoldHouse has been all about building completely, I don't even want to call them ladders. I don't think we're creating steps for people to climb because I think that's very prescriptive. I think what we're doing is offering them new opportunities that they can determine the path they want to take to get there, but know that the ceiling has been lifted and that if you want to be a founder of a company, you can raise the money. If you want to be a creator or a musician or an artist, there will be people there that will give you the resources and give you the projects to work on or unlock these different experiences and exposures that you can like jumpstart your career much faster, and you don't have to wait until you've amassed a fortune by working in a traditional day job to feel the level of security that you need to go after that. So I think that's what's important for me, and what I actually think has changed in society in the last few years.
Good gem in there. The gem about understanding that if you decide to play a game with a ladder, no matter how fast, if there's a ceiling, you will hit it. I've never heard anyone say that before, so thank you, Megan. Rembrandt, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, the way I do it, I think it's just I just knock the door down.
Yeah, same.
and say I'm here, and I'm gonna plant myself at this table.
Yeah.
But in all reality, I think I've done a pretty good job of seeking mentors and making those mentors my friendtors. And then from there, I think that it allows me to be introduced to these tables, to these rooms that were maybe back in the day not available, or I didn't know that they existed, right? I remember I asked a friend tour of mine a couple years ago, like, I really want to be on a board. I don't know what that means. And so she explained to me there are so many different boards, Rembrandt, like private, public, paid, unpaid. Like, I was just like, oh, I didn't even know that there were these types of board positions. I just thought it would be sexy to say, Rembrandt Flores on the board of whatever, of this company. And then so she kind of broke it down to me, and she happens to be Asian. And she's like, I'm an Asian woman. Imagine how hard it was for me to get on these boards. And I'm like, okay. So after understanding sort of the politics that go into these boards, by the way, it's like, it's one of those things. There's no like, how do I call it? There's no instruction manual of how to get on a board. It's not like you go to college and you have to get an MBA, and then you have to be part of this company for X amount of years before you get accepted to be on a board. It's not even like that. It's literally unsaid, or there's no spoken rules. It's just like, it's just different for each company, as what was told to me. And I think being a good person and being forthright about your ability and why you want to be on the board will probably get you closer to being on that board, or being in these rooms, or having a seat at this table. Providing value at the end of the day is what people need and want, right? Obviously, Megan and Michael could speak to this. I'm sure they're on boards and whatnot. I'm sure, Chino, you can speak to this too. But and that's what I found for myself, from someone who hasn't been on a board to now being, I guess, on a couple boards. Unpaid, I think. No, I'm pretty sure they're not paid. But one day, maybe.
That's how we find a paid position. We actually have an entire initiative in GoldHouse that does this.
So I need Megan's help to find these positions where I can be on these boards, where they're actually going to pay for my quote unquote knowledge, or background, or what I can bring to this table. But yeah, and I continue to try to provide value regardless if I'm going to be rewarded for it, because at the end of the day, I think people look at that and saying like, oh, if Rembrandt's circulating in the room, then there must be a reason why he's in this room, and maybe there's a reason why we should put him on this board or something like that. That's how I see it, and I think that's the only way that the advice I could give to someone who is younger than me, or hasn't been in the business as long as some of us on the Zoom. But I think just being present and knowing your worth and knowing your value, and then actually like going for it, is how I've sort of I guess moved through life, and how I've gotten to where I am today, and hopefully everyone feels the same way, that they are worthy, and no one can tell me that I don't belong. That's all on you. That's all from within. So if you do believe in yourself, and you belong in that room, or on that board, or on that table, then prove it. And if you do, then you'll be there. That's how I see it.
Man, I had to soak that in for a second. Michael, do you want to jump on this? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that was good. That was amazing. I can talk a little bit of my story. Like I'm in this weird position where, yeah, my parents came to US with $300, but I went to Yale and then Harvard. And so on paper, I have the pedigree. And to me, what was the big equalizer was education. And that was my parents making a sacrifice where my mom moved to a small apartment. She slept on a sofa bed for 4 years. So my sister had a good public school in a good district. And so that's what opened the doors. Like, I'm like you, right? Where I didn't know what a consulting job was. I didn't know VC was. But I would say, like, one of the great things about America is, like, if you go to Yale and Harvard, they sort of tell you. Like, you sort of, like, your classmates tell you there's somebody's like, oh, shoot, there's jobs that do. Like, I didn't know that. Like, you know, when your parents come to you as $300, they're just like, you know, my dad was very educated, but he wasn't like somebody who knew like what consulting was. And he was just like, you know, okay, you want to work at a bank. Wasn't quite sure what exactly that meant. But when you go to Yale, it's like, okay, there's working at Bank of America, and there's working at Goldman Sachs, there's private equity, there's like, oh shoot, there's a lot more to it. And then, you know, like, to me, I will be eternally grateful that education was the great level set. Once I was there, I loved what Rembrandt said about mentors.
Mentors.
Mentors. That, that's happened with me, and it just so happened I had met, you know, especially to my career, my co-founder of my first company, Talkbin, now runs a $3 billion company. He was Y Combinator COO. Like, that was invaluable to just exposing me to another group of people. Working with Joe Montana, Mike Miller, like my other partners of the group too, then exposed me to another group. So it was these people who were able to do it. And then it encouraged me to give back a bit more. And actually, again, that's where I think Rembrandt did such a good idea. He also gave to me when I was just starting off, right? Like, giving back. And then you never know what these people become. I happen to be in a position as a seed venture capitalist where the people I gave advice to then go on to start billion-dollar companies. And then they become friends because I gave them one piece of good advice back in the day. And they're like, oh yeah, you helped me with this. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize it was helpful. But when they become like huge, that exposes me to another group. So, you know, I would say it was that path that got me today, where it sort of opened up these doors, right? But it took multiple steps.
Yeah. I love that a lot. God, so Megan, I'm just gonna recap. Like, the ceiling is a farce. There's no ceiling. Like, if you climb the ladder, you're eventually going to hit a ceiling. But
the ceilings exist. You just have to be willing to lift them and break them down.
Yeah, like Rembrandt, break through the wall, break, and understand that you're there. Like, I'm here, bitch. Like, this is me. Like, not like Kool-Aid Man, but you want to be welcome, of course.
I'm here. I'm not leaving. So get used to me being at the table.
The common thread here is just like people. So Michael, it was like with CreatorDAO and your experience with Y Combinator, it goes back to the community, right? Like, there's an actress called Issa Rae, which I appreciate. I heard a soundbite from her, and she's like, young people love to network up. They go, oh, I'm a young software engineer, I need to meet all these CTOs. But what's underappreciated is networking across, where it's like, I'm a seed stage founder. I'm not right now, but when I was, it was like, okay, great. I probably should have prioritized meeting other seed stage founders in the category, because one of us, this is just math, is going to hit the market at the right time with the right thing and kind of show us and kind of break the matrix. What I mean by that, it's like, I had a good friend of mine. We were roommates for 3.5 years. And he hit the NFT market like at the right time with the right thing, and made, I don't know, 8-digit millions of dollars in a short amount of time. And I'm like, that can happen. Like, that's possible. But none of my friends, like, I have friends who are acquaintances who, you know, you kind of just hear about the news of what they've done. But when it's like your boy, you understand, like, he's not too different from me or people that I know that I can help. And so it really gives you a new perspective. And so I was last night at this charity poker game, and I was in that house. I'm like, whose house is this? And they told me whose house it was. It was a host house. I'm like, this is so inspiring. It was some house in Alamo Square. I didn't want to put a price on it, but everything was original. 3 floors. They had staff. I'm like, this is really cool. But I think it's a matter of like seeing what's possible. Have you guys heard of the concept of the 4-minute mile? Like, where people thought it was impossible to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Then one guy did it, and like thousands of people started doing it. And so I think in terms of getting in the rooms, you got to be on the lookout for these people who constantly get in these rooms and do it consistently. I think that people who do startups for like 2 years, it's like cute. It's like nothing actually happens after 3 or 4 years. And especially when, they had that classic background of like, I was in consulting, I was in banking, did a startup for 1 year, and that was it. And now I'm back in big corporate. This reminds me of a quote from Jay-Z where he's like, you've been in the game, or Nas, where he's like, you've been in the game 2 years, something, something, something. You've been in the game 8 years, been going on vacation. And he's speaking to longevity. Do you guys, Michael, you've seen people like walk the fire, build several billion-dollar companies. People just talk about grit a little too much, and I think it's a great concept, but there has to be more to it, the longevity. I'm thinking it's a bit of like building the right network and the right community of people, networking across, networking up, whatever. In your guys' experience personally or vicariously through your peers, what do you think speaks to someone's longevity in their space? And it seems like the thing we talked about before has a lot to do with people, friend-tours, people who you're building with at the same level or at different levels, like Michael and Y Combinator. You see these founders. You mentioned in the opening thing at CreatorDAO, you didn't talk to the mentors at Y Combinator. You talked to the people in your cohort. And then Megan, you can perhaps touch on this as well. But what about people speaks to their longevity, either by themselves or how they interact with others?
Michael, do you want to go first?
Sure. Like, I think there's certain people when they network, they're looking for the quick, like, relationship. Like, I do X for you, you do Y for me. And when I see my career, it's like you do something to help somebody. 5 years later, somebody helps you and you don't expect it in some way. It's super random. And to me, that's longevity. Like, if you come in it with like a really short-sighted mindset, it's just not the right way either to build relationships, network, whatever. Even if you are a guy who goes like, hey, what's my art? It's just not how it works. And there's certain relationships that will never pay off. And that's okay. You got to go with it, that you're just like, hey, either have a giving mentality or understand this is not how it works. Like, I've seen that at least time and time again where I just think about like, in my venture career, like I helped a bunch of people with their YC applications over time. And there's been a couple that have gotten in and it's like easy, like, oh yeah, it'd be cool to invest, whatever. But there was one I remember, they didn't get in and they didn't get it again. And then maybe it was a year later, they got in and it was suddenly like the hottest deal. And now I think they either raise them in Andreessen or GC at $500 million. And when that hot deal was coming out of YC and we were like, hey, can we invest? And I vaguely remember I helped them, but I was so like unclear. Like, they're like, yeah, we didn't get in the first time you helped us. And we didn't get in the second time, but the third time we got in, now we're like one of the higher companies. So like, of course, if you want to invest, you're in. Like, we remember you. I barely remember that I helped them because I was like, I've done a lot of like interview preps just for friends and stuff. And so I was like, this sounds familiar. I don't really remember it. But they were like, we remembered it. And so that was a powerful moment because, yeah, like usually it's a pretty bad sign if a company can't get into YC and they can't get it again. He's like, that's not going to be a relationship that pays off ever. Like, like they're probably not going to succeed. But it ended up being like, the company last was worth $500 million on paper. And we're investors in that because of a relationship built years in advance where I remember writing them recommendation, helping them a little bit. And to me, like when you talk about longevity, it's not having short mind behavior around like how you look at like how you help people, mentor people, spend time with people, and more looking for a long term. There's, I think every crypto company, sorry, this is a tangent, but it goes in a little bit. Every crypto founder right now has to be like, hey, you're in the worst time to be a crypto founder. It is really bad right now in the market. And there's a lot who will be like, well, should I be a crypto founder? Let's get out of it. And those that will stay and they'll build. And 2 years from now, I think those who build and really stick by will show something really special. And that's longevity to me, like building during the tough times too, as a founder.
Yeah, I think it's like a very classic, like people forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And in that moment where you're doing something for them and when you have absolutely no incentive to yet because they have nothing clear to offer you, that they're really going to remember that you stuck your neck out or that you went to bat for them. I'll just add on like 2 things to what Michael said, because I really agree with everything about the long game and caring about relationships for the sake of relationships and not for what people can do for you in the moment. I think 2 things stand out to me about longevity. One is tribe and the other is purpose. I think on the tribe thing, humans are fallible, and no matter how talented or how well educated or how well resourced someone is, at the end of the day, I think it's very hard to do anything alone for a really long period of time. And so I think there's this concept of like building your tribe around you, whether that's through seeding these relationships early on and finding the people that really believe in you and believe in what matters to you and are going to stick with you. That's going to help you. And I think create the grit. I know you don't like that term.
I like it. I love it.
But I think grit is so much more than what's inside one single person, and what they build around them that helps them continue with that. And then the second thing is purpose. And I think this one matters to me a lot, because what I've seen from founders is that there is like this, like, jump on the bandwagon, do what's cool, do what's sexy. But then there's also these founders that are like, I want to be a founder, or I really care about this specific problem that I'm trying to solve and I'm the right person to solve it. I think those are the problem solvers that tend to have the most longevity, because they don't back down when it gets hard, and they are willing to fail over and over again because what they're working on matters that much to them. And I think this extends beyond starting companies. This extends to any type of career someone wants, or any type of organization, be it for-profit or nonprofit, that someone wants to start, is that the purpose is ultimately what keeps you going when things are difficult. So tribe and purpose.
Rembrandt, want to take us home?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, they've said everything that I wanted to add. But the one thing that I do want to say that I kind of alluded to, or actually said already, but it's the authenticity. Because at the end of the day, the reason I'm able to still work in this business, the reason I've been here for over 16 years now, is because I genuinely love what I do, and that is to help people. And I'm doing it for that sole reason, right? I love working with founders. I love working with dreamers. I love people who are building, and I want to help them. So whether that be, again, through their comms, through their marketing, through their events, through partnerships, through advisory, whatever it is that I can provide, I do, because I honestly want people to grow. I honestly want people to succeed. I honestly want to say, like, oh my God, I helped that brand become a $1 billion company, a unicorn or a decacorn, or whatever it may be. I get so much joy out of that. And that's the only reason why I do it. Yes, I'm not going to say I'm doing it for non-profit reasons. I obviously do care about that. And I definitely do want to get paid for the work that I do. But the reason why I think I can stay and have this sort of longevity in this business is because I truly love what I do. So as long as you're genuine, authentic, and in your hearts of hearts are doing something that you honestly love and would probably do it even if you didn't get paid, that's when you know that that you found the right career, the right path, and the longevity is going to happen, because it's just going to happen. You're just going to keep living and doing this great thing that you're supposed to be here to do, and don't mind doing it for the rest of your life because you love it. So I think we should end that there, knowing that, as long as we are genuine and are really present and really showing up for the right reasons and doing it because you honestly love what you do, then we're going to be here for the long run.
All you need is love.
What a great ending.
Yeah.
I love it.
Michael Ma, Rembrandt Flores, and Megan Ruan. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I had a ton of fun. I forgot.
Yeah, it went by really fast.
I forgot it was recording. I feel like it was a therapy sesh, bro. Chill. All right, guys. I'll send you guys the recording afterwards. I had so much fun. Thank you so much for joining. Like,
thanks for having me.
It was great to see you.
All of you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.